Hi everyone, my name's Jackson Dunn, and this will be my response video to Alexis's presentation on the Pacific Theater of World War II and the fall of Shanghai as they are presented in the novel Empire of the Sun by J.G. Ballard. In her presentation, Alexis does an excellent job of referring to the Pacific Theater of World War II, both as it is perceived in the novel, as well as how it actually went down in real life, with one of the most impressive aspects of the presentation being the constant correlation of events in the book to those as they transpired in real life, as well as the correlation she finds between the experiences of Jim and the experiences of Shanghai. She starts her presentation by giving a brief summary of the plot of the novel, giving us just enough information to get the gist of things without making her entire presentation a glorified summary. Her presentation is then broken up into three sections, the first one pertaining to the concept of denial. She gives a brief overview of the history of Shanghai and by how this point in time it was already being threatened by Japanese aggression. This correlates greatly to the theme of denial that she discusses in this section of the presentation, as it is the denial of Shanghai to accept the Japanese threat that lead them to being so overwhelmingly outmatched in the coming conflict. This also correlates to real-life events, as the Allies were themselves in denial of the oncoming Axis threat. She then quotes directly from the book, using Jim's belief that Shanghai was a city of clowns to refer to Shanghai and Western society's inaction leading up to World War II. Had these clowns been just a little bit more prepared, it is unlikely the war would have been as horrific as it actually was, a fact which I praise Alexis for pointing out. The next section of the presentation has to do with change. In it, she discusses the sudden shift that Shanghai, Jim, and the rest of the world go through when Japan makes good on its threats and properly invades Shanghai and Pearl Harbor. She then gives a brief overview of the Pacific Theater of World War II. It's a bit bare bones and kind of glosses over the conflict as a whole, but Alexis makes up for this by instead focusing on the effects that the war had on civilian life as well as on Jim and Shanghai. What follows is what I believe to be the best part of her presentation, in the form of her discussion on the loss of innocence. In it, she correlates the loss of innocence that Jim undergoes throughout the novel to the loss of innocence that Shanghai has gone through due to Japanese aggression and European colonization. Just like Jim, Shanghai is almost unrecognizable from the Chinese settlement that it once was, the horrors that it has hosted and borne witness to leaving it a hollow shell of its former self, finalizing this comparison by referring to a quote from the book that refers to Shanghai and Jim as both being broken. She then goes on to discuss trauma, how Jim almost regrets the end of the war. Sorry about that. She then goes on to discuss trauma and how Jim almost regrets the end of the war, as he has been so immersed in his fight for survival that he can no longer go back to a civilian life and to the innocent world he once inhabited. And, once again finding a correlation, just like Jim, Shanghai can never again go into being the peaceful land that it once was. Overall, I believe that Alexis did an excellent job of correlating the events of the book to the events of real life, as well as finding hidden meaning in the events of Jim's life and its comparisons to the experiences of Shanghai, with her final conclusion being that the story is a message about the fragility of life and how quickly everything can change, becoming almost unrecognizable from how it once was. Thank you.